going to test this, Kelly, because you know Bill and I like to walk and talk. So I'm going to walk away from the podium. Can folks still hear us online? Okay.
Yes, sounds good.
Can they still hear me?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Appalachian Regional Commission Program. Well, I was about to say how to apply workshop/webinar. Kelly, but how many people do you think we have online this morning?
It looks like we have 33 people on.
Okay, all right. And so we probably have a little more than that in the room this morning, including DHCD staffers. And so thank you all for joining us this morning. And so you'll have a chance to hear both from the Virginia ARC program staff, who I will allow to introduce themselves this morning. We have so many people in the room and so many folks online who will not be able to do individual introductions as normal, but there'll be an opportunity during the breakout session for folks to introduce themselves as in smaller groups this morning. And then we'll also have our colleagues from the ARC Washington office introduce themselves as well this morning. And so with that, I'm gonna say who I am, if you don't know. I'm Dr. Samara Holmes, and I have the pleasure of having two hats for the Commonwealth of Virginia. My full-time job is actually Director of Office of Broadband, and then my part-time gig is being the Appalachian Regional Commission State Program Manager. So with that, I'll let Bill introduce himself.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm Bill Hartley. I'm the ARC RSBA Program Manager. I work out of the Abingdon Field Office, and go ahead and real quickly just let all the DHCD staff in the Abingdon Field Office introduce themselves, because if you succeed in getting a grant, these are some of the people you're going to be working with from DHCD. So we're starting with Kathy Boatwright.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Boatwright. I'm the Program Manager in DHCD's Abingdon Field Office.
I'm Deanna Stoddard. I'm a program administrator. I'm Kelly Chickless. I'm a CDBG planning grant specialist in Abingdon. I'm Marsha Dempsey. I'm a program administrator.
I'm Jennifer Ketchum. I'm a program administrator for the ARC. Riley Drake. I'm a program administrator.
Stuart Burrell, I'm program administrator out of our Abingdon Field Office.
And so Omar, you introduce yourself?
My name is Omar Bati. I'm with the Richmond office. I'm ARC policy planner, and I'll help you all with getting your application going.
All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva Saddle. I am a ARC policy planning program analyst at the federal office, and I'm also I'm very excited to say that.
And I'm Tim Gedepke. I'm also at ARC as one of our program analysts in the non-construction, business and workforce investment division. So Eve does construction, I do non-construction typically. So yeah, happy to be here.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and officially start our How to Apply workshop. Make sure no one's texting me. Town manager from Abingdon. Okay. Tell you later. It's on my watch. I can't read it. I hope he's not. Is anyone from the town of Abingdon here for How to Apply? Because that might be why he might be texting. Yes, thank you. Tell him I'm talking. All right. And so I am really bad at clicking and talking at the same time. So I will do my best to advance the slides this morning while I'm talking. Some things are easier to hear than others. Okay. So maybe they didn't hear everyone do the introductions. Okay. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and click to the next slide. And so we just did our welcome. And so today, today's conversation will focus on, we'll talk a little bit about Appalachian Regional Commission program. Does anyone not know what the Appalachian Regional Commission program is? If you don't want to raise your hand, I am perfectly fine with that. Okay. And then we'll talk about our CAM system, and then we'll really go into the application process. And so I'm just going to do the first couple of slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to.
I'd like the ARC background.
Yeah.
101, that's me.
Okay. All right. So that'll be later on in the presentation. All right. So I'm just going to share with you. And so you probably, if you haven't worked with the ARC program before, you're probably going, why is there state people and federal people? Well, it's because it's a federal state partnership or state federal partnership that was established in 1965 to really look at the disparities between the Appalachian region across the country and the rest of the country. And so the way we work at ARC, which is why there's so many people from both our agency and the DC office involved in this workshop today and ongoing conversations as you all develop your projects, is it's a bottoms-up approach. It's never the government coming in and saying, okay, here's all the things we need you to do in your community. It's you all identifying what your community priorities are and then coming to us as a state along with the federal government to develop those projects. And so as Omar said earlier, he's a key staffer along with Bill and myself to help you all formulate your project to submit to DC. And what we have started doing the last several years is involving the DC staff as you all are having those project development conversations, and you'll understand why as we go through this morning's presentation. And so the emphasis is on distressed counties. However, we have 4 distressed counties, and I think they're Lee, Wise, Buchanan, and Dickinson are our 4 distressed counties. And we'll explain the reason behind distressed counties and then I can't say there's a benefit to being in the distressed counties, but there is in terms of match requirements and different resources for distressed communities. And so with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. And so just to really share how the application process works, as I said earlier, you come up with a project idea. You are required to engage your local planning district commission. Some of the staff are here from different planning district commissions. And so if you don't know your planning district commission, we will make sure we connect you with the appropriate one. And then the application is due March 31st this year. And so you submit the application through CAMS, which we will go over shortly. Once you submit your application, DHCD staff internally actually reviews those applications. That's a joint partnership between the Richmond office and the Abingdon field office. And then recommendations are made within our agency to our leadership, and then those recommendations go to the governor. And so the governor's staff reviews the recommended projects and then selects those that will go to Washington, D.C. And so our goal is to get the applications to ARC Washington, hopefully within the month of June or July. And so that's where Eve and Tim and their colleagues actually review the applications. And we'll talk about that in more detail this morning. And so once they, if you've been through an ARC review process, I tell someone it's like standing before my dissertation committee where you thought you had all your questions thought about with your committee members, and then it goes to the full committee and there's additional questions. And so questions come up around performance measures and preliminary engineering reports and if it's dated. And so there's a back and forth often between our office, the applicant, well, I guess the recommended applicant or awardee and the ARC reviewer. And so then that staff approves the project, reviews it and says, okay, it's in good shape to go to the federal co-chair. Then it's ultimately reviewed and approved by the federal co-chair. So our expected deadlines this year are March 31st is your application due to our agency. We plan on getting them up to DC, hopefully by July 2025, and then that you will receive approval by ARC Washington by September 30th. The one at the bottom is tentatively. Part of that is because we hope by having this workshop and providing ongoing technical assistance that we reduce the number of questions that have to be asked by the ARC Washington reviewer so that you can get to the table by September 30th, which is why we say do not assume you're going to have your grant ready to go before October 1st. Does anyone know what September 30th is? Anyone online or in the room? What is it's the end of the federal fiscal year, which is why we want to make sure that your application gets approved before that. And so the next slide, because and this is my last slide. And so this is the map of our economic status for our counties for Virginia for 2025. We're going to go again in detail what it means to be a distressed county, at-risk county, transitional, competitive. If you're actually in attainment, you're not eligible for funding. Is that by the time? Okay, by the time.
No,
They're competitive.
Competitive, sorry, competitive. Thank you. See,
You don't have them.
okay, we don't have any, but we used to, no, by the time, you used to be competitive, that's why. And so by the time, if anyone's online or in the room from Botetourt, I think, yeah, I know you live in Botetourt, but your project is in Pulaski. And so Botetourt is really thrilled to be eligible for ARC funding. And so with that, I'm going to officially turn the presentation over to Omar.
All right, thank you.
They can't see it on the virtual side.
Oh, they can't? Oh, they share it. It's shared.
All right.
I thought it was being shared. No. So y'all missed my beautiful slides. Okay, now they got it.
Working out?
All right, I'm not gonna go back through all of those. They will be posted online. All right.
Yes, so for everyone taking notes here, if you missed something, don't worry, it's all going to be online. We'll send these slides out to you later as well. So first of all, step 0, deciding to apply. Hopefully everyone here is an eligible applicant. You're either a nonprofit, an educational institution, PDC, a local government, or anyone else. Private organizations or for-profit businesses are not eligible to apply. And if you are a nonprofit, you must show your 501c3 status. So when you make a funding request, first you have to begin with the impact in mind. What impact do you want in the community? And from then on, you have to describe your project based upon what you're expecting to see. So if you're looking on, creating a wastewater treatment plant, are you looking at how many people are getting connected? Or how many feet of broadband are being connected. Similarly, the applicant has to have the capacity to do the project. So do you have enough staffing capacity? Do you have enough funding to do a feasibility study first or to do an environmental plan? So make sure with your PDC in those discussions that you do have the capacity to do that. Similarly, do you have enough match funds? So if you don't have ARC funds, do you have other funds from other organizations that can come in and supplement that? Similarly, the project needs to be implemented with all the local stakeholders. So your PDC should be involved. If it's a construction project, you have to have the state as the RSBA contract manager. Similarly, the project has to be sustainable after ARC funds end after a certain amount of time. Will you, as the grantee, be able to continue to sustain the project and making sure that it continues? And similarly, as you go through the process, you'll be reaching out to me, to your PDCs, also to ARC as well. And so.
Mark, think about it again. They
Sure.
can't see it on their side. If you could either maybe put it in the chat and I can flip through it on my own, or
I can do that.
Sorry, guys.
sorry about that, guys.
Strange. All right, give me 1 second.
Kirk is very visible.
Well, a nice face. All right, let's see.
Sorry about the technology.
No worries.
Bill, did you email it to me yesterday? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you can actually
I
open it.
emailed it.
Okay.
Kelly.
I can't get into.
Oh, you can't get it by email.
into-
Sorry.
All right.
Oh, Kelly's not our email. We can't,
Yeah.
can't email it. You gotta drop the file in the chat. Just put plus.
All right. Yeah.
When you click the plus button, it should say add a file.
Yeah.
No, the plus button on the bottom of the message.
Nope. Is it because we're in the meeting right now?
Okay.
Omar, I think it was working. Try
Mhm.
dragging it back in there. It popped up for a second. But try dragging the file back in.
On your file folder.
Yeah. From the file. I think you're just like going too far away. So could you drag it in closer to where it says type of message? Oh, so it was popping. Yeah.
Mm-mm. It won't let me in. All right. working now? No.
They see it. You can see it.
Okay.
How we present it.
If you-
Yeah.
Can you advance to the slide just to make sure the slide?
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
Well, it's gonna have to be like this. Yeah.
Okay, we're okay, but
No worries.
yeah.
Talk to somebody and then get-
All right, where were we?
And you can see all the chats.
Yeah.
Such as like,
All right, we're gonna have to deal with the interruptions on screen. So again, back to eligibility. Make sure that you have the capacity to do so. Make sure you know the impact that you want, the outcomes that you're looking for that must be quantifiable. Again, how many, how many businesses are being improved, how many businesses are being created, how many students. If it's a workforce development, how many people are you getting engaged there? All right. All right. So your application must follow some of these ARC strategic goals. So first, must be building Appalachia's businesses. So strengthening and diversifying the economy through development strategies such as entrepreneurship and business development. Second goal is the workforce ecosystem. So looking at education opportunities, healthcare. So I believe the health wagon is here today. Housing as well. So we're trying to move more towards affordable housing, though ARC is a bit iffy on that. So we can discuss that later. Childcare as well. We're trying to move towards that. So anything that can help Appalachians get to a job, obtain a job, stay there and advance along a sustainable career pathway. The third goal is looking at Appalachian infrastructure, making sure water, utilities, energy are being able to be accessed in the region, building regional culture and tourism, part of the Southwest Virginia initiative that we have here, the local creeper trail, again, trying to invest in the region's local cultural heritage and natural assets and such. And goal 5 is building community leaders and local capacity. So again, looking at local capacity of PDCs, of local governments and communities, trying to bring technical assistance to everyone and trying to make these projects occur. And again, we have the targeted investment priorities of Virginia. These are separate from ARC and Virginia's 4-year development plan made by the governor. They have a lot of overlap. As you can see, there's one extra bullet point, but really it's part of infrastructure. So we have broadband as part of infrastructure, energy sources, water, again, wastewater, asset-based development, and environmental projects. So we have 2 main ARC programs. We have the area development, and then we have the federal ARC programs. Under area development, we have construction and non-construction projects. The construction projects have a budget up to 700,000, which could be $1 million if it's a regional, has a regional impact in more than one PDC, and a planning grant is eligible up to $300,000. The federal ARC programs, ARISE, has to be in multiple states. Power is for coal communities impacted by the loss of coal industry, and INSPIRE is for substance abuse projects. Here we have the funding caps. Again, for construction, it's okay. For construction, it's 700,000, up to $1 million for regional projects, for access roads. So bringing a community closer to a state highway, you have up to $1 million for that. And usually you go with the Virginia Development, VADHS, Development Highway System, along with that. For non-construction planning grants, you have up to 100,000, and again, goes up to 300,000 if it has a regional impact. Our state funding allocations from the past year has been upwards to a total of 23 million. We expect about 17 million this upcoming year. Most of that money is going through distressed counties and access road. So again, Tamara was mentioning earlier that if you are a distressed county, you do get not a better chance, but you do get more match money. So if you are a distressed county, you get 80% match, whereas if you have an attainment county or a competitive, it becomes less, up to 50. This is the application process going forward. So I will be the person making sure that you go through the CAMS application. So that will be happening March 31st. Again, going through the goals and strategies, making sure that everything combines with, complements that. In addition, so after about a month or two of turning that into or reviewing these applications and then sending to the governor's office, then we have the funding announcement, which would tentatively be around May. Around June to July, we would finalize that submission to ARC, and ARC will hopefully have those approval decisions to y'all by September 30th. And hopefully contract negotiations should begin by December 25, and that will be in Bill's purview. And so non-construction projects. The first thing that you got to see, there's a program handbook that I will be sending out later. It'll also be on the DHCD and ARC website. And that has all the application questions that you need. And in addition, it has this checklist. The first thing, transmit a letter. Don't have to worry about that. I will be getting that letter to you, but it's something that ARC does require. The federal forms are forms that detail your budget, that have a memorandum of understanding. These are also necessary for any ARC for a federal project. So I will be sending these forms to you and helping you along the way in any way that you need it to be filled out. Similarly, your PDCs will be able to help you if you don't have any ARC application experience. Following that, you need to give an executive summary detailing which goals and strategies match your project, describing your project simply. What is it going to do? Who's going to benefit from it? Which counties or localities will it take place in? Who will be on the project? Will there be other funding sources? Will you have another state or federal agency matching funds? A lot of times USDA gives money as well. So always something to look at. Again, the strategic rationale, saying, well, why does this project need to happen? Why are you applying for ARC funding that you could not have gotten otherwise? Is it a lack of capacity? Is it just a lack of, needing the expertise to go through this, or bringing in other partners? Performance measures. From the beginning, I said you have to look at the impact of your project. So who you're going to impact, how many people will be impacted, and what are the long-term outcomes and goals? Are we getting 5 houses under a new wastewater connection? Are we getting, X amount of people, access to businesses, or, X amount of people for workforce development? And again, you cannot do any of these projects alone. Again, while you're coming to the state and federal level to collaborate, the more partnerships you have, the more localities and local stakeholders that you have in the project, the better off you will be in the long run, and the better off it looks for ARC approval and scoring. And again, project sustainability and capacity. Is it economically and sustainable in the long term? We don't want a situation where a grantee maybe bites off more than it can chew, and then ends up having to change ownership, or have to get more funding, or scale down the project later on. So really want to make sure that we're not being too forward in thinking, to do too much. So for non-construction projects and planning grants, the goals and strategies come to life in these sort of ways. So for the first goal in providing business development, so technical assistance to local businesses as well as capacity grants, we have the Virginia Main Street program as well, which is similar to downtown revitalization studies. So working maybe not in tandem, but a similar like project in revitalizing the downtown of the cities here in Appalachia. Workforce development for people in the area, people affected by, again, the end of the coal industry, by the opioid and substance abuse crisis, trying to get people in that program. Again, any other construction project, usually we recommend that you do a feasibility study or a planning study ahead of time, just to know what you're getting into, if it's even possible, before, again, you enter into $1 million construction project that might or might not be able to be finished or be sustainable, either economically or environmentally. As I was going through the main application checklist, you need your strategic rationale. Again, it has to meet one of the state strategies, so workforce development, childcare, healthcare, energy, infrastructure, broadband, has to address a local and regional need, a gap in service or access that does not exist, that, trying to bring in other partners from maybe outside of the state or from other parts within the state into the Appalachian region. And we always recommend that, you bring in multiple partners across different locales. Again, if it's a regional project, both for non-construction and construction, you are eligible to more funding if you do it that way. So for budget and match, it's very important that you maintain a consistent budget cost and narrative, explaining all your line item expenditures. If you have personnel, the hours that they're doing, what tasks are they dealing with on a day-to-day basis, making sure that the project cost is consistent on all the forms. It will be a lot of forms, I'm sorry to tell you, but I will help you along with it, and a lot of it does repeat. So just making sure that the numbers stay consistent throughout is important and will save a lot of time. Similarly, if you have other cash match or in-kind amounts, we will require letters certifying and confirming that. And if you have property offered as match instead of cash, then we will need a appraisal for that as well. This is what the budget information narrative template looks like. This is the ARC budget form, and then we also have a DHCD budget form. They're almost the same, except the DHCD one is asking you to tell you where the other funding sources are coming from. So if it's coming from USDA, it's coming from Tobacco Commission, or any other funder, then it will be that. Sustainability plan, again, describe the capacity of your organization post ARC funding. You need to have 5-year pro forma financial projections, both for construction and non-construction, especially if you're doing a business development project. And again, we wouldn't need a PER or economic or environmental sustainability plan in the process if it's a construction plan. If it's non-construction, then a feasibility study if you're going down that road later on. And I'll pass it on to Bill for the construction project.
Thank you, Amor. So construction projects, the construction projects are a lot like non-construction, similar but different, because a construction project, and that's where most of our money goes into. Most of the projects that get recommended from the governor are construction projects. There are a few non-construction projects every year, but most of them are construction, whether it be water or sewer, whether it be broadband, a building, some kind of community facility that's being renovated, maybe some kind of outdoor recreation, development of a trail, those kind of things that involve construction. And again, the basic process is similar for construction. There's a lot more detail that we need because a construction project is a much more complex vehicle than a non-construction. And it also brings along certain federal requirements, such as NEPA and Davis-Bacon, things like that. And so we want to make sure about the capacity. And one of the big differences, should you actually be recommended and get the ARC agreement, is the construction grants. DHCD administers those. We serve. You hear the term RSBA, Registered State Basic Agency. Basically, that means we serve as ARC to administer these grants. And so that's what myself and my colleagues in the Abingdon field office, we do that. So kind of keep that in mind. But again, the goals, ARC, their 5 goals are the same for any of the programs they offer. How these might work into a construction project, with businesses, it could be a business park, an incubator, workforce, training. I've seen, for example, this project over in Galax that their goal was around workforce. They renovated a building to provide substance use disorder training to get people back into the workforce. So, you can see how it's construction, but it met that goal. Most of our projects fall probably into goal number 3, critical infrastructure. Those would be water, sewer, broadband, things like that. We do have a lot of things that fall into goal number 4, building around our outdoor assets, because we're very blessed here in Southwest Virginia to have a lot of great cultural and natural assets. And then I don't know that I've ever seen somebody do the capacity building in a construction project. So, all right. So again, the project description, again, just like Omar talked about, what are you doing? What's the need you're serving? How are you going to go about this? What's your thing? And when you look at the CAMS application, it asks a lot of these questions. One thing you will need that's a little different from the non-construction is that detailed work plan with your milestones. And there's a template that ARC has for what those are. And so, when we were talking about this, kind of a theme for the workshop, mentioned to Mara, we, kind of piggyback on Stephen Covey, but begin with the end. And think through what you want to do. You have a great idea. You're trying to figure out how to put this idea together, how to convey it to us, so we can recommend it, how to convey it to the DC staff so they can understand what it is. We, want to see your project be successful, but the more legwork you put in on the front end and come up with a good project and do some of these preliminary things, I can tell you, you're going to have a much better time implementing that project. So some of this, and the work plan is one of those. Think through, what do I need to do to get this project done? It might be, there's some pre-contract stuff. I need to complete the environmental review, and that's a benchmark ARC is going to require. If you get awarded, we're going to be required to report that back in the BAMR, the Basic Agency Monitoring Report. What about design, and lay out that timeline, permits, going out to bid, your procurement, your construction, all the different phases, and kind of think through what that is and the timeline, and make sure that it's realistic, and you give yourself enough time to complete that. If it's something like design and the architect finishes, but then you've got county board of supervisors, somebody has to review that, you might want to add an extra month for reviews, so that partly when you do this, you can look and what you're doing. Before I worked for DHCD, I worked as a grant manager. I was in a university setting, and one of the faculty, we won a million multi-year award from the federal government. And they came in and they're like, woo, way to go. And then 2 days later, they came back to my office like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? I was like, let's look at the application. Let's pull out the application. Let's pull out the timeline. You know, what has changed since we submitted the application? What has changed? Again, you're applying now in March for something that, you know, you won't, the earliest you'd receive the award would be the 1st of October. Then you got to go through, if it's a construction project, the contract negotiation with DHCD, all your contract stuff, your NEPA, all those kind of things. So, you know, you got to kind of think ahead. It may be, you know, a year from now, at least probably, before you'd be able to put this out to bid. And then how long is the project going to last? And, you know, add a month or two at the end of it to make sure you can close the project out. That, you know, it's not just like, well, we finished and the work's done, because we've got some work on the back end that we have to close out. And part of this, when you come up with these dates, is that's what they're going to put as the period of performance in ArcNet. So if you want to be realistic, give yourself enough time to do it, but also we don't want to have to keep coming back and getting an extension because you just underestimated how long. Sometimes things take longer and you run into roadblocks. So your work plan, again, is very important. And in the work plan, who is going to do the work? And that's important. And some of this, it'll be yourself. It may be a contractor. Some of the stuff like the environmental review, you know, please talk to your PDCs. They can help with that. That's what they're there for. They know that process. And so, you know, kind of that we can see, okay, you know what you're wanting to do. You know who's going to do it. You know when it's going to be done. One of the things that I think is very critical too in this process is this 2-page summary, and there's a template. There's always a template for everything, but there's a template for that. And part of the reason this is very, you know, a lot of people I think wait to the end and they're like, oh, I got to do this, and they kind of put stuff in there. This becomes one of the things that a lot of the ARC announcement, the approval memo, a lot of the language that gets put in here gets copied. And for consistency, for example, you'll put something in there like the purpose that may end up in the approval memo. And then we're going to use that in our contract at DHCD for consistency across all the things. So what's in there, your performance measures, your sources of funding, these things, again, you want to be consistent throughout, but this is like a real high level. Here's, you know, a couple of paragraphs, a few sentences about each. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the goals. Here's our funding. You know, here's how we're going to keep it going. And our performance measures, and particularly the performance measures, sometimes you explicitly state that, but sometimes I know that when it gets to ARC Washington, this is one of the places they're going to look. And you might have additional things that you have mentioned that become additional performance measures. So, you know, think through what you put in that. I think it's, you know, a good way to kind of think through what you may even want to start there and think about, you know, these areas. And then as you fill out the questions, you can elaborate and add more detail. You know, again, the rationale, the partnerships, that you of course you have to not only meet an ARC goal, but identify a state strategy, you know, if the county status, if it's distressed or not, that you meet a local regional demand strategy initiative. A lot of times these are regional studies, like for example, if it's a water sewer project, PSA, they've done a study about what's needed in their region, and this is right there. The PDCs do a lot of those regional plans that you can help, and it kind of identifies this as a priority. And so you know, you can attach those that show how this ties into what's going on. Collaboration, you know, some projects definitely lend themselves to that more than others, but anytime you can collaborate or leverage something that's already existing for greater benefit. Consistent budget and match. And this is probably one of the big things in reviewing this and getting it done. And even once you're going, but One of the things that you will have to have for a construction project is a preliminary engineering report or preliminary architectural report. And that must be no less than 2 years old. Because part of the reason is in that it will talk about the work that needs to be done, but it will also have a cost estimate. And when we're reviewing it, and especially ARC Washington, we want to make sure that you're not using numbers from 5 years old. Any of y'all that have done construction projects and you've seen the way things vary over time, especially the last 5 years. A project, for example, that you started, say, 5, 6 years ago in 2019, by the time it got approved and you put it out to bid, things had changed. So we want to make sure those numbers are as exact or fairly recent, and you know what you're doing. If it's a larger project and you can carve out, like ARC is going into this part of the project, only focus on that part. And that's something we can have some discussions about how you think about phasing things or doing that, because you don't want to put, you know, if it's a $2 million part and our money's only going into this, you don't want to show the whole, say, 10 million of a larger project, because then one, you're going to be responsible for all $10 million, tracking it, different things, the timing. There's a lot, it's much cleaner and easier to keep, you know, kind of think about where our money's going. As Omar said, consistency on all the forms. You want to make sure your maths, that your numbers add up. I mean, and you know, sometimes it's an easy mistake. People transpose numbers, but sometimes things change and they don't get changed. In one form it's changed, one form it's not. So that's always a question. The commitment letters for the match, we want to see the commitment of your match, that you have the capacity from not just if you get the ARC funds, that you have the other match lined up, you know. So you'll have to provide the documentation for that. It may be, for example, if it's another funding source, like I know a lot of people use Tobacco Commission or water, sewer, Southwest Water, Wastewater, you know, an award letter, that's a match. If it's local, you'll need to state, you know, what the locality that they're committing this amount of money to the project. But we need to see that the funding is committed, so that when the money's awarded, you're not like, okay, now we got halfway there, we're going to spend the next 2 years trying to get the rest of the money. If that's the case, probably not saying you don't have a bad project, but the timing probably isn't right. You need to, and that's one thing you need to think about when you're applying, especially for a construction grant. You may have a good project, but the timing may not be right. And that's, you know, I know sometimes when we talk to potential grantees, one of the things is like, do you have a PER? If you don't, maybe instead of coming in for a construction grant, you might want to consider looking at a non-construction grant to get the ability to do the feasibility study to do that PER, so that then you can come back and actually come in for a construction grant. Again, I know when you say that, and I've had that with meetings with potential grantees, they think, well, you're trying to slow the project down. No, we're actually trying to speed it up, because if you move forward now, it won't go very far. And again, when it comes time to implement it, it'll be much difficult. So we want to make things work for everybody. And again, should you use real property, we do need an appraisal if that's part of your match. Like it's a building and you acquired the land and you want to use that match, we will require the appraisal. Sustainability, and again, a lot of this, if we're putting money into something, particularly a building or something, you know, what we want to see is that once it's built, that you can operate it, you can run it, you can make sure that you'll be able to achieve your benefits, to achieve your performance measures. You know, with these construction projects, and it can range from a lot of different things, from just the notice of federal interest all the way up to some kind of security instrument. But there is a 20-year period there to make sure that that your project is serving the public need it is. And if you think about it, some of that is we want, like I say, we want to make sure the investment's going to be there, that people are doing what they are. So what does that look like? You know, some of these questions in the thing, we're going to look at the capacity of your organization to carry out a grant. We're going to ask, what other grants have you had? Who on your team has the expertise, the knowledge? Make sure that you have the ability to carry this out. But then once it's done, you know, we're going to look at things like, you know, if you build a building or renovate a building and have somebody come in, you know, see a pro forma, see a staffing plan, see, you know, a visitation plan. How, you know, if that's your benefit, how are you going to, again, think through not just the end of the construction, but what the benefits like, what's going to happen once this is done. And the more you can do that at this phase, the better your project's going to be, because ultimately you're going to have to do some of that along the way. So again, as we think through making sure that the investment is going to be there, that you can operate it, that it's not like you just build it and then walk away, that this is going to achieve what you set out to do for the long term. And then I'll let Omar talk about performance measures.
All right, thank you, Bill. So going back to performance measures, knowing what, again, starting with the end in mind, knowing you know, what your project wants to accomplish, which usually is in specific, and ARC wants quantifiable outputs. So again, they must be driven by goals and objectives. You know, if you're making a wastewater treatment plant or improving sewer connections, how many sewer connections are going to be made? How many communities will be improved if you're just doing it in one locale? Or how many people are going to be put on the system? And so they must always be together. Output is, you know, how many people you're trying to serve, and the outcome is your end result that you're trying to achieve. So you're trying to serve 50 people on the local sewer line, and hopefully you'll have 50 improvements or 50 people who now have long-term access for that. So for the first goal, business development, entrepreneurship, again, you know, making sure if you have a program for giving training for local businesses, or again, workforce development, trying to see how many businesses you're going to target, or how many businesses you intend on improving at the end. Similarly, with the second goal, education, workforce development, how many students are going to be served, how many students improved if you're working with a local university and you're trying to bring classes for other people, or, you know, how many, what kind of audience are you looking for? You know, are you looking for students, for workers, for trainees, and then searching how to fit them together. And again, they should match each other. Healthcare access, health promotion, again, how many patients in a certain area are you looking to serve? Where did you get that number from? It can't just be an arbitrary number. You have to do, you know, an analysis, feasibility study, see how many people are in a certain location, how many people are on this road, how many people are on the next one. You add them up, and that should be what you get at the end. For our third goal, water, sewer, infrastructure, it is our most common goal that projects use. If you are doing a broadband project, then your output will be in either in the speed, looking at how fast you want to do if you're trying to improve speed, or if you're improving access, how many linear feet of fiber optic are you laying down? And again, how many households is that improving? Is it 5 households? Or if you're looking at simply people improved, if it's an access road project, again, you're trying to get more people access to the local highway system. So the more businesses that you're aiming to put on that system is how many that you should see improved in the end. And again, your outcomes might not end up that way. They might end up more, less. Like, this is just a projection based upon your justification, but the intended goal should be that it ends up as we all intend. For the fourth goal, the tourism facility or outside recreation, if you're trying to make a new visitor center, trying to project how many visitors that you would have, or how many people in the area would be expected to come to said visitor center or trail center. The fifth goal, technical assistance capacity for local PDCs are usually handled in a separate grant. But going back to the Virginia economic status and match. So here we have a list of all the counties, whether it's distressed, transitional, or at risk. If you are a distressed county, let's say your project is $1 million, that means 20% of it, $200,000, you're responsible for coming up with. The $800,000 ARC would fund. That 20% doesn't have to come from your own funds. You can find other agencies, other funding opportunities. If you don't have any money and need to use an in-kind match, you can always do that as well. But as Bill was mentioning earlier, make sure this is part of capacity, making sure that you have these funding sources confirmed, making sure that you have a letter confirming this match. Again, going back, if you have support from another agency, if you're applying as a township or a city or a county, you should have the PDC as well along with it, and they could help or find more matching funds if necessary.
Hey, Omar,
Yes.
what about our independent cities? Where do they fall in terms of match requirements?
They fall under whichever county they are in. So, yeah.
Yes, we have it. Oh, probably can't hear that line.
Sure.
So yes, we have independent cities in Virginia. However, remember ARC is made up of 420 counties in 13 states. Unfortunately, not everyone is a Dillon rule state like Virginia. And so, yes, while your city may be distressed and your county is not, you do have to follow the match requirement for the county. The reason I bring that up is that's the number one question we get for folks in projects that are in a city. You do have to follow your county match requirement. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you, Tamara. So yes, important to know. So what is match? Again, it can be cash that you come up with yourself. It can be a loan from another agency, USDA. I know it does loans. In kind, again, if you don't have the cash, you can leverage your own assets, usually in the form of property. Again, you need to get a MAI appraisal for that. And in-kind match cannot exceed more than 50%. It could be land, property, equipment, anything of that nature. Again, documenting match, you need to have an official letterhead or at least a copy, confirming the amount of money. It must include the dollar amount committed. That dollar amount should remain consistent across all documents. Going back and forth, the match might change. The funding allocations might shift a bit. So that match percentage might change. So just remember to look through it. Again,
Do you have to have your match when you apply for ARC initially?
You do not, but you should have it lined up. The faster you get it, the better it is for everyone involved. It just makes it easier, and it won't delay the application. Again, if you don't have your match confirmed by the time of ARC approval or by contract negotiations, then your project will be delayed until the next fiscal year.
Will ARC actually approve your application at the final voucher match?
No, sorry.
We will send it without the match.
Yeah,
They will not
approve it. Yeah, apologize. And again, if you have an in-kind contribution, you must explain how you determine the value. Again, usually you get that with an appraisal. and you must track. So if it's personnel records, timesheets, you must track what the person is doing, how many hours they're working, what the cost amounts to. And Bill will talk about project intersections. Case studies.
All right. So I want to give a couple examples of some projects that we've had here in the region that have finished up in the last year or two. And some of the things, I think when you see the project, what it did, you can see how some of the concepts and things we talked about around performance measures, around partnerships, around funding play out in a successful project. The first project here I'm going to talk about is Project Intersection. For those of you that don't know Project Intersection, it's right there in Norton at the intersection of 23 or 58. As you come right there up on the hill, you can now look up there. Once upon a time, it was an abandoned mine land. Then you probably saw them moving dirt. And let me tell you, they moved a lot of dirt up there. I don't know, millions of cubic yards, millions. But now Earthlink is up there. So the project, the idea was to do, they had a power grant to do the site work for the project, to create a space up there to bring industry. They also got an area development grant once they had the first business up there to run the utilities up to that business once they knew who it was going to be and had a confirmed business. So again, multiple sources of funding from ARC, but from so many other funding sources. No. No. But they had enough funding, because you'll see this was like over $6 million project. ARC picked up some of this, but Ambler through Virginia Energy, Abandoned Mine Lands was huge funder, BEDP, Virginia Tobacco Commission, Go Virginia, Southwest Water Wastewater helped some with the utilities. I think just about any entity that typically funds a project in Southwest Virginia had a hand in this. So while that is great, and we talk about partnerships and working together and all those funding sources working together, as Tamara just asked about match, multiple funding sources create a different challenge that you need to think through. So if you've got a lot of funding sources, who is paying for what? What is matching what? And you need to think through that as much on the front end as you can, because definitely when you, should you move forward and get awarded, it's going to be a challenge. And this was a very challenging project to keep up with all the funding sources, not just who's paying for what, but the timing of the funding sources, the way they want their reimbursements. And I credit the Lenoisco and the RIFA for the work they did, because that was a challenging thing to manage that and to keep up with it. The other thing is mention partnerships. The Project Intersection, where it's at, it's part of the Lonesome Pine RIFA, Regional Industrial Financing Authority, a great model that takes all the localities and they come together for an industrial development project. They all chip in, they all share in the revenue. So, Lee County, I think, is part of the RIFA. They get some of the revenue from this as well. So there's not that competition like, oh, this has to be in our county or we can't support it. It's good for the region. So again, it ties back to that regional strategy, because you're going to have workers where that's at, from Lee, Wise, Scott, Russell, all throughout Southwest Virginia coming there for the jobs. Key thing is to think about, when you think about partnerships and you're talking about it, what do those partnerships look like? When you get to the point of implementation for some of these partnerships, we're going to need to see memorandums of understanding that actually outline those partnerships and the roles that each person's going to play. Don't necessarily need that at the time of application, but you may want to talk about that in your narrative. Like, we have these partnerships, and this partner this is the role they're going to play. This is what they're going to do. What would be even better in the application is to have that partner, maybe they're a fund. If it's funder, it's a letter of commitment. If they're just a partner and they're supporting it, it's a letter of support. Have them write a letter that explains, hey, we like this. We're going to support this project and partner in this way. And it may be like you're renovating some kind of community service facility. And once it's done, you're going to offer programming to the community. So who's going to, again, gets back to sustainability. You're going to serve so many individuals. Who's going to serve them? It's going to be an outside partner. It would be good to have that letter that says, yes, we're committed to, once the construction is complete, we're going to come in and provide these services. That way we see you've already got that lined up. We know who it is. It makes it more sustainable. Performance measures. You'll hear us, I think everybody up here today will talk about performance measures. It's one of the most tricky things to think about as you're thinking through a project. What's the performance measures? How are we going to do it? How are we going to track it? So for the power grant, where it was the site development, of course, they had so many cubic yards of site development. They had performance measures around businesses created. They had performance measures around leverage private investment that would be part of this. So the area development grant was a little more traditional. It was still, I think it was linear feet for the water, for the utilities, and then businesses served for, the businesses that it would serve. But one of the things, and you see this in a lot of construction problems, you see this again in the other example I'm going to use, is how do you track those performance measures? Here, which one's going to be appropriate? Again, for the type of work you're doing, the performance measures be a little different. But how do you track that? Because some of the things like with the site work, well, when they finish the site work, you can verify the cubic yards moved, that performance measure, but they haven't built the building yet because they can't start building the building on the pad. So you don't have the leverage private investment. So you're going to have to come up with a plan. How are you going to track that? You need to kind of think through what are the performance measures? How will I track that? The good thing is when the grant is complete, you still have up to 3 years to meet your performance measures. ARC gives you that because a lot of these projects, and you especially see this in the next one, but some of these, you can't begin the way you structure your performance measures. You can't begin to do that until you've completed the construction. So that's why they give you that window of 3 years. But just keep that in mind that that's an ongoing thing that you're going to have to. We're still tracking some of these with this project. I send them an email every quarter reminding them. It's like, hey, where's the report? And they, reply back. And so, we track that. So you got to keep that in mind. As I say, I think this is a great project. It's very complicated, but you can see, even in a complicated project, I think it highlights some of these areas that even in a less complicated project, you may want to think about. Next project to talk about is the Millwall Theater in Whittle. And that's an old theater in downtown Whittle. And they came in and they wanted to renovate it to kind of help bring people downtown, to spur tourism, to help support the businesses. It fit in with a lot of things that Whittle has been doing with other DHCD funding through Community Development Block Grant or the Main Street program, to kind of revitalize their downtown. So this was kind of envisioned as a catalyst to help move downtown forward. When I say complex funding here, this project used to for tax credits. And so that's a unique source of funding that brings its own unique challenges. And not just challenges for funding it, they had tax credits, tobacco commission, IRF, I think USDA was in it.
Yeah, with plan,
with land, private foundation, yeah. But the tax credits in particular, because as you're documenting, not just in the application, but you're thinking through, okay, how am I going to spend this money? How am I going to document it? And the tax credits do set up a whole unique situation, the way that the cash flows through that you're going to have to document. And remember, if you are successful in the grant, you got to think through, how am I going to keep up, track all the finances? Because DHCD, we're going to want to look at that during our compliance reviews. You could possibly the project might get audited, so the auditors are going to want to look at it. So, when you have these complex situations, think through simple things about your record keeping. Do you have the systems available to keep the records and track that, and make sure that it's there? Because that will save, having those systems on the front end will save a lot of headache and a lot of time on the back end. I can assure you of that.
I'm gonna echo Bill on that, because if your project gets monitored by ARC, they're not going to only look at the ARC financial documents, they're gonna look at the non-ARC financial documents. And both of these projects have been selected for audit by ARC.
Yes.
So make sure you maintain all of your files. And like Bill said, setting that system up on the front end saves future you if your project gets audited by ARC, and it will save you when you are monitored by DHCD.
So again, like I say, we want to try to, as you're thinking through your projects, and that's one thing, some of these questions in the application we ask about capacity. Do you have the capacity to do this? Sometimes, you have county governments or larger organizations applying. Sometimes ARC is very unique that nonprofits can apply. You have very small nonprofits that struggle with this kind of record keeping, dealing with that. So that's one of the questions we do ask: what's your experience? Again, you can lean on, to some degree, the PBCs. They have experience in this. They're happy to help. I'm speaking for y'all, but I think I can. I know y'all are good about trying to help. And capacity is just, in general, an issue that ARC recognizes. But again, try to think through that. Performance measures. Again, so what were the performance measures in this? Of course, the construction, so many square feet renovated. That was easy. You finished the construction, that's there. The other performance measures, though, were businesses served, businesses improved, and new visitors. So again, you can't have anybody visit the theater until construction's done. So they're still tracking that performance measure. But how are you going to track it? Talk about that. If you have an idea, definitely once the project's awarded, we're going to want to see a detailed plan that we know that you can track that. But if you know now, that shows us you're thinking ahead. You're thinking through what this means. Businesses improve. What does it mean to improve a business? You might say that, like, this project will serve 26 businesses in the historic downtown Whitfield, and of those 26, 18 will be improved through additional tax revenues. So you're going to track it by looking at business taxes paid. So you've got a metric. We know, just something that simple shows us, okay, we see that you thought this through. You've got an idea of how you're going to track this. Again, later on, you're going to have to come up with something more definite. Sustainability. This is a good example of sustainability. How do we sustain this? The theater is a nonprofit, so they own the building. Once they renovated it, they have to staff up. They have to show a pro forma that once we get this open, we will now have the capacity to not only serve the public and achieve our benefits or performance measures, but we will have the capacity to be a viable organization that will be here for the long term and continue to serve the public. That's what we want to see. And so the way we do that is through that 5-year pro forma, through a staffing and operations plan. So again, if you have a project like this, talk about that in the application. Hey, here's what we know we're going to have to do. Again, you apply now, it may be 3 years before you do that. So you don't have to, things have changed or you don't have to know, but we want to see that you understand some of the challenges you're going to face, and that you have something there. And then construction delays and overruns, that is always a problem. I use this as a good example because this project came in and was awarded right before COVID, and COVID hit and the project got delayed, and when they picked it back up, things started costing more. And so I think a lot in projects, it's definitely not as steep as it was. But again, that's why we want to look and make sure you have a current PAR, so that those cost estimates are pretty current. And also, you need to think through that. What will happen should, we put this out to bid and the bids are higher than what we anticipated? And so how are you going to make up that difference? And, we want to see that you've kind of thought through that, have a strategy for that. Some things, delays, you just run into the unexpected. Project intersection a minute ago, when they got up there, they ran into some rock that they did not anticipate. But, that happens. I've seen building projects where it's a renovation, and Project Light, they took the roof off. And once they took the roof off, it was a lot worse than they had thought. But you won't know that until you take the roof off. So, again, that you kind of have some strategy for contingencies, thinking about how you'll deal with these things. Again, I think the more you can do that up front, the more it's going to make your application stronger, the more that we see that you thought through a lot of these, but also when you get on the end of implementing the project, it's going to make it a lot smoother. And that's really, we want to see good projects. We want to see things that are going to help the communities that you live in. I mean, all of us here in Abingdon office, we live in Southwest Virginia. We live in these communities, this region. We want to see it prosper and thrive. We want to help you come up with good projects that will be, they're always a challenge, but we want to try to make sure to make them as easy as possible to implement. And if you run into challenges, we're happy to work with you to try to do that. But as much on the front end that you can frame your project in a way to kind of mitigate those challenges, I think you have a stronger project. And that is my portion. So let's go ahead. We'll take a break. We have some coffee and water over here. Bathrooms are down the hall that way. Stretch, and then we'll come back and we'll hear from our federal partners. Yeah. Let's come.
Sorry. Just hard to see them, like, I know, what you can, people pay attention, but he's cracking jokes, they're like, very
we start again, I do have an announcement to make. You're the owner of a white Chevrolet with Virginia tag 1511FF or FF. Your car was hit in the parking lot.
Want to read the plate again now?
I haven't watched it.
1511FF. It's a white Chevrolet.
Does it have Dickinson County on
We
the
don't
side?
know.
We don't know.
Okay.
If you think it's your truck, you said come either to the security desk or to the.
Or the
information
truck,
desk.
the truck?
Well, a truck should be an
If it's your
SUV.
vehicle.
I will go find out more details.
Actually, I'll go. I'll go.
You
You all.
Okay, thank you, Roy.
All right.
I know, thought it was a joke. Nice opener.
You know, it can only go up.
I know.
All right,
Um,
can the folks online hear?
I think.
All right, so we've talked about the application process. We talked about the application process from DHCD from the state's point of view. Now we're going to let our federal partners, Eve and Tim, talk about both the application review once it gets to the federal level, as well as talk about some of the other things that ARC does, some other projects, programs they have, just to make you aware of those. So you, as you're thinking through, that's a question sometimes we get. People come to us and they're like, I got this project, I'm thinking, should I apply for area development? Should I apply for power? Which is the better fit? So, you know, you can see what's out there and try to think through how you want to do that with your project. So again, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here and for just listening to us. Just as a reminder, my name is Eve. I work at the federal office for ARC. I manage the construction projects and some of the planning related construction work for ARC for Virginia specifically. The work that I do is anything related to infrastructure, but also outdoor rec, tourism, and travel. So I work a lot with friends and, you know, kind of those areas. So what I wanted to do a little bit is just kind of talk about the federal review process through a case study. It's similar to the state process. However, because ARC is a federal state partnership, we get applications from 13 states that all do their applications differently. So we kind of have a standard process that we, you know, I think is helpful for y'all to know what some of those issues and like pinch points could be with those projects. Yeah, so I will get started and make sure I know how to use this computer. Cool. Okay, so I wanted to talk and go through a case study of a recently approved project, and this one is underway. So we're going to talk about the Southern Gap Amphitheater. This project was submitted to us in 2022. At the end of the year, it's a area development grant, $700,000 for to build an amphitheater in Buchanan County. This project is really interesting because it was a fantastic project from the get-go, but because there were a little bit of some challenges with match, which we talked about, a whole bunch of things got a lot more complicated, especially from the federal side. So the project wasn't approved until the end of 2024. So 2 years went through without this project getting approved. But I want to talk about it because it kind of touches on some of the more complicated processes and policies that the federal office has in relation to projects. And so
I was just going to say that was in our locality, the PDC, I don't come up that time. And one thing that happens, like the nonprofit came and said, okay, we can apply. So they went ahead and applied and really didn't tell the PDC.
Okay.
So we could have helped them
Mhm.
a lot with some of that things. And by the time we found out and reached out, it had been, you know, a couple of years and we did not really know. So we're in the process of trying to straighten some of that out right now. So just so you know.
That's good to know.
Well, and I think it would have been a lot easier project if they had reached out. And I'm sure at every one of these you all tell them to, But when they don't, and then they, I know for a fact the gentleman, he's like, well, I'm gonna start construction, I need my money. And he hadn't even went through negotiations, he hadn't done a thing. And
Yeah.
we were just like, well, we need to wait just a minute.
Yeah.
So I
That's,
just wanted to share that with you.
And so to Debbie's point,
Yeah.
remember in the presentation earlier, we don't make you get a letter from the planning district commission because that would, we think, put an additional burden on the PDC that may not be part of the application. But we do have to make sure you consult. And I will say to that grant applicant's defense, that project, and I'm not going to steal each thunder, was really complicated. And despite the numerous times where we said throughout the application development, have you talked to the PDC? Yeah, but we didn't say, well, what did we actually tell them? So we are going to do our due diligence to make sure that the conversations are thorough and an understanding at the PDC level, to Debbie's point.
yeah, no, that's really helpful. So I am not managing that project. It's like another one of my colleagues, but for most of the projects I've been managing so far, there's been a letter of support or some involvement with the PDC, which has been super, super helpful for us because we have that point of contact in case we have questions, but also because Virginia does a really good job of capacity building with the PDCs. So there is a level of, capacity, for lack of a better word, that you all have that we can kind of trust for things like construction and engineering and things. So do that. So just a couple policies we're going to touch on is our construction policy, just generally, our travel and tourism policy, which has some extra difficulties and particularities. And then we're going to touch on performance metrics because why not? Cool. So we'll just start with the policy. So for construction, as you guys heard, ARC funds construction and non-construction projects pretty generally. The bulk of project work we do in Virginia, like Bill said, is construction related. We do some non-construction projects, a lot related to tourism and outdoor rec. We also do planning projects for construction. So while that's a non-construction project, it does build the foundation for a really good application. And you'll see why that's very, very important when it comes to actually doing the implementation. Like Bill mentioned, all of our construction projects have to be administered by an RSBA. And so what that means is ARC is a little different than other federal agencies. So EPA will probably manage your project themselves and make sure you're adhering with all of the construction things like Davis-Bacon and those things. ARC is smaller, and so we contract with agencies like the department to manage that construction component. So just a little background. So what I would do in my role as a construction manager is I make sure forms and get that project through approval, but then Bill and his team will make sure things are being met on time and report that back to me. And that's a little bit different for non-construction. Yeah.
Chevy Equinox, large Chevy Equinox, was parked on the other, towards the lower side of the building near the flagpole. If you think that was you, Chevy Equinox. Thank you. Okay.
Awesome.
What is RSBA?
It stands for Registered State Basic Agency. So all of our 13 states have some sort of agency, a part of their state, and they will do kind of the implementation of the construction. So for Virginia, it's the department. For other states, it varies, but that's a way that ARC can make sure we're, not super large and have that kind of direct relationship, and it's very helpful on our end. So some of the requirements, so when you are doing a construction project, we talked about this, but you have to have a preliminary engineering report signed by a licensed engineer. And that's one of the big areas where I think your PDC can help you, is making sure that those forms and all of the requirements in that, like a construction budget, like cost estimates, are included. So that we have to have, and a note about that is it needs to be completed within 2 years. So I know there's a delay between when you submit the project and when Washington gets it, but because construction costs change, we want to make sure it's the most, the most relevant, I guess, at the time of application. So some of the pain points we get are, hey, this PER was done in 2019. I'm sorry, you have to do it again. So having those updated when you submit will make sure applications go through smoothly. Other things that, other applications require, so your basic agency, no, this is just for construction, but like your match, your support, your letters of support, all those things are typical to other projects. And then we don't require, but we strongly recommend that construction and non-construction projects have completed or, are going to complete very recently a feasibility study and a business plan, an asset management plan, and a 5-year pro forma. So while, at the federal side, they're not required, the states may differ on that. But it's not uncommon for a project coordinator to say, like, this is really awesome. I love this tourism project that you guys have created, but what is the kind of evidence that it's going to satisfy local demand, things like that. So having that on the front end and having done kind of that extra work will make sure that come project approval, things go through a little bit smoother. Yeah, so those are kind of our requirements for construction. Now I'm going to talk about the travel and tourism policy, which is one of our more complicated policies. So any projects related to travel and tourism and outdoor recreation, both construction and non-construction, there's a little bit of a higher bar for approval from the federal side. And that's just because, compared to water and sewer, it is not as readily identified as something that is economic development. We very much value it as economic development, but there's a little bit of a higher standard of proof, which these folks will tell you. So when we're evaluating a travel and tourism project, we need to make sure that those projects are an integral part of some sort of strategic plan. So we just want to say, cool project, is there anything you can point to, like a process that kind of helps to narrow that down, shows that it is from the community and something that's needed. And then B, they're going to also have a cost benefit analysis requirement. So even for non-construction projects, if you're doing, a marketing plan for outdoor rec, for example, ARC at the federal side is going to say, awesome, but how do we know this is the least cost, implementation strategy or least cost policy? So there's going to be some additional questions with travel and tourism that you may not have gotten in relation to sewer or workforce development. So yeah, so these are some of the questions that we're going to ask you in relation to those feasibility questions and cost benefit. Some areas that's helpful to have information on is, those related to market analysis. So what's the demand for this project? Have you looked at other, areas in the community that have similar assets? How do we know they won't compete? Things like that. Answering about economic impact, the estimation of new dollars in the community. Those hard numbers, while they may not be, it's hard to predict that in the future, they're really helpful for us at the federal side to be able to justify kind of the importance of a project related to tourism. And then feasibility. So what does implementation look like? Do you have a staffing plan long-term? So those are questions that we get from lots of different policy people, and we get them more often with travel. So it's just really helpful if you submit a project related to this, you've done this work on the front end. And then just briefly going through performance measures one more time. I think both of these guys talked about them, but we need performance indicators to demonstrate economic impact. And so economic impact is really broad and it comes in a lot of different ways, but it's helpful for us to be able to pull a report that says ARC funded XYZ project. These are the numbers that, that show the impact. So our implementation grant, so those are construction, things where we're building or doing things related to programming. Those have to have one output and one outcome, which is a little complicated, but there's a list and they have a list, and we can share it, of the approved indicators we use. And then planning grant, so I'm creating a plan that only needs one output. It can have extras, but typically output is one plan. So when you're doing your performance measures, please make sure that beyond just saying how many people you're going to serve or the numbers tell us what that means, right? So what does serving look like in relation to your project? And then tell us how you are determining the methodology. So it's hard to predict, but when I get a project that says we're going to serve 800 people, that sounds really awesome, but I do have to make sure that it is an estimate that kind of makes sense and has some backup behind it. So you'll get questions on that. So just add it in the application at the beginning. And then, so we have a list of ARC approved performance measures that you must use. But if you have other performance measures and other ways you're demonstrating impact, please feel free to include them. But you just also have to have one of those approved ones. Cool. All right, we're going to talk about the case study and where the applicant did some of these things and also did not do some of these things, and kind of how that contributed to 2 years in waiting, but finally approved. So just to start, so the project, like I said, was initially submitted to us. So we received it in August of 2022. I'm not sure when it was actually done, definitely a few months before that. But it was super detailed initially, which was great. And so it had a lot of those supplementary things. So this was a construction project, but it was also related to tourism. So we had to have both the kind of market analysis and things like that, and then the PER. So a lot of components were required, which was awesome because we got them initially. However, the project didn't have the match confirmed. So like these folks said, if we don't have a confirmed match, we cannot approve a project. So it's really important that you have that, because what ended up happening in this case is they were relying on one large grant to serve as the match. They wrote the application with, you know, that in mind. They did a cost estimate, they did a PER, all around those numbers, and the match didn't come through.
So I went back to my email. I started talking to Asher in 2019.
That's a long time.
Before the application came.
And that's 3 years when you should talk to your PDC.
I hope it didn't happen in between there.
Right, right, exactly. So that's a very long time. So it was just approved, which is fantastic. But yes, so they did all of the, you know, work around doing a market analysis, hiring different consultants to do those really big pieces that are costly, around a number that didn't end up matching. So the grant they wrote on the application that was pending from EDA didn't come through. So then they had to scramble and kind of figure out, okay, how can we fill this match gap? Because there's a certain, you know, proportion of match we require depending on the project. And eventually the applicant found several smaller sources, but altogether it didn't make up the loss of that initial grant. So what they had to do was, you know, the application no longer met the match requirement. So they had to essentially kind of create a new application. So they had to go back to the drawing board because they had crafted a PER and all of these things and a site plan around money that wasn't there anymore. So because they didn't have a new match that filled the gap, they had to pick a new site and do new PER, do new cost estimates around a new site. So they had to do all of that. In between that time, right, COVID happened, construction costs went up. But then also, I think there's a casino in Tennessee or in Bristol that just opened, right? The Hard Rock. So that's the introduction of a new tourist attraction that can impact the market dynamic. So they had to go back and do the market analysis again. And so all of those things just added, oh, and then the federal forms, which are very complicated, and they're also complicated for us too. So all of this happened. And so they had to do around, I think Sarah told me, 5-ish application rewrites and resubmissions until the project was actually finally approved. And a lot of that also comes down to kind of consistency, right? When you have to do that, I get a federal form that has one number, but it's the old number and it has to match the new number, and it can be really frustrating. So match is important, and please try to have it as figured out as you can. But good news is it went through, but let's talk a little bit about some of the pain points and where areas you guys can help, you know, preempt these areas. So because the match changed while the concept didn't change, they were still going to do an amphitheater, still aligned with the goals. Because it was a completely new site plan, it was essentially like they had to create a new application. So you can reuse some of the work, but with all the calculations and estimates, you got to redo it. So some of the pain points for this application was, finances. So finances changed, new everything. The complexity, so the match in this case was originally going to be one grant, which is awesome and very easy. And then it ended up being a lot of smaller grants, right? And so from our side, we have to kind of verify that all of those grants are, for lack of a better word, legit, and make sure that they make sense and they actually add up. So that adds some time and complexity as well. The timeline. So I think 2 years ended up going, between project submission and then project approval. Additional time means additional forms may be required. So just keep that in mind. And then consistency with the numbers and everything, making sure it matched. So I think what Sarah ended up doing, my coworker, I think she required a completely new application every submission just to make sure that she wasn't matching an old form in a new form, right? And so with some of the smaller changes, one form and one page can be resubmitted, and it's easy to add that, but for something this large, it just requires more.
Question.
Yes.
So they start out as a Virginia ARC application.
Okay.
We do not make you do an entire new DHCD application.
That's good.
What you are responsible for doing is an abbreviated version of your original application, hitting on the priority areas that ARC needs to make it to the approval table. Just to split, because our application was kind of daunting, and so I do want to share that.
Yeah.
We don't make you go back, and I don't know how many questions we have now. We used to have like 30 something. I'm pretty sure we have less now, but I just want to let you know you don't have to go back to the drawing board for our application. It's an abbreviated version.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. And when you resubmit an application for ARC, there is a lot of content that you can reuse, right? But we just having a new file that I can say like, this is the one that was submitted is really helpful.
And it also helps Bill if it is approved, because remember this project changed scope and size and even location. And so it also helps us because what was originally CalMed in 2022 was nothing like the project that actually got awarded. And it also helps Bill and his team to manage the project once it's awarded.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where some of the good, what they did well and what made the application, go through as slow but quickly as it did. They initially came in with a very strong application. So they had done on the front end, they had a PER done that was sufficient. They had done kind of the market analysis, had worked with other firms to make sure that those supporting details were done. So what they ended up being able to do is, after the new site plan was created, take those numbers and take that data and just rerun some of those calculations. And so having relationships with the folks who are doing that work makes a rewrite a lot easier. Let's see. I think with this one too, they broke out the ARC portion. So it was a much larger project, but they kind of broke out where ARC was going to be funding, and they submitted that part. And so that's really helpful because if you submit one large project, it federalizes the project, which means that all of the funds are subject to federal requirements, and like Davis-Bacon and things like that. But if you break out a project, then the federalization only applies to the smaller part. So it just makes it a lot easier for their team to manage, but it also releases the burden on you guys with the rest of the project.
Now, Eve, how does that track in terms of outputs and outcomes? Because
great question.
If it's phased.
Great question. She's got all the good questions. So when you do break out a project, the outputs and outcomes should relate to that broken out portion. Because what happens a lot of times too is we'll get a continuation. So we'll do one phase of work and then the applicant's like, we need more money, we want to do another phase. And they'll report the same metrics from the first application. And so we try to make sure that it's not double counted. So if you do want to include, it is helpful to know like at the end in 15 years, this is what it's going to do. but you need to say, for these funds that we're receiving, this will be the output related to that project. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, so all in all, a lot of issues, but they started out really strong, besides meeting with their PDC. I guess.
I think they finally got a hold of us after you approved the 2022
Okay.
application. So that's when they first
Mhm.
realized they needed help managing. the
Right,
project.
okay.
So
Yeah, so again, do that. So it ended up going through, but I think it has a lot of lessons for you guys as you're going through larger scale projects that you can take and hopefully not repeat. Or know that if this happens, we're not trying to be mean, it just, we have to do these things. So for all applications from the federal side, just kind of keep in mind. So please, when possible, try to have a confirmed match, or if it's not confirmed, have a backup plan and have thought about what that requires. Make sure your initial applications are detailed and consistent. 3, develop really strong relationships with your partners, because when areas, when ARC has a question and needs more data run, they were able to go back to their contractor really quickly and get that question answered. So it didn't, it stood in limbo, but it helped shorten that time. We may end up from the federal side requesting updated PERs and budgets if they're older than 2 years. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to add as well that Tamara just reminded me of. For construction, I think we talked about contingency. While contingency is not required, ARC likes to see between 10 and 20% of contingency in the budget. So keep that in mind. Just hit me. Travel and tourism projects need to include a feasibility study. If a project, and a travel and tourism specifically, doesn't have this feasibility study or market study, consider applying for a planning grant, because that can help you produce and make sure you have the foundation to get that implementation grant funded the next year. Make sure all of the forms are up to date. Any major changes, and while it may not seem major, it may require a whole new rewrite. So keep that. Break out your ARC portions from the project. Projects with a lot of different forms of match are going to require more oversight and more complication. And then make sure your performance measures are backed up by some sort of explanation and they come from that ARC list. So these are where the federal office, I think we hit a lot of our challenging, we go back and forth a lot with questions for construction projects. So keep those in mind. And yeah, I think that's all I've got. Are there any other questions really briefly on that
have you
case
looked at
study?
his performance measure? Have you looked at the number?
Me, I have not. I'm not the manager of the project, but
Well, that actually brings me to a great point. Debbie, do you remember the first project we worked on together?
Cleveland?
Yes, ma'am. And so while Cleveland is now a part of the state park system, the original application sent 10,000 new visitors to the town of Cleveland.
Yep.
And I will tell you, Debbie and I sat next to each other in the town of Cleveland's building. And I looked at her and I was like, we're about to be married together for a long time. And so speak now or forever hold your peace, because y'all might want to rethink this 10,000 visitors will visit the town of Cleveland. And while I hope 10,000 people have now since gone to the town of Cleveland since our investment, yes, be realistic with your performance measures. And Bill.
I will reiterate that. When you apply, I think is even mentioned, show how like X number of visitors. What's the methodology? How did you arrive at that? Is it real? Be realistic. I mean, sometimes people think you have to have this big audacious number for to get our attention, and we look at that and we're like, I don't think they know what they're doing. That doesn't make sense.
And a lot of times it comes from documents, especially with Cleveland. Someone prepared and they were like, oh, once this happens and the clinches, all this part. So they think this is what's going to happen. But, it could take 20 years.
And sometimes those slip through. I will tell you, they slip through.
And also, after we review it, it goes through the process of the governor's recommendations. Omar's preparing all this stuff to send up to Eve and Washington office. He usually reaches out and wants to, can you verify? You know, again, because once it gets up to Washington, and especially they enter it into ArtNet, it is virtually impossible to get change.
And there are a lot of eyes on it as well. So just keep that in mind. And that's why we ask these questions, is because we've had cases in our, I don't know, 50 years of time, you know, where someone will just pull out a detail of a project and be like, we funded this and this is the only thing that came out of it, right? And so we're also thinking about how to make sure projects, because they are good, but how they translate into whatever climate we're in at the moment. So yeah.
Cool.
And I think that's it. If there's no more questions, also feel free to, ask me after. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague in the federal office. So Tim is going to talk about some of the other grants that we manage besides area development. So
yeah.
Thank you.
So again, my name is Tim Knepke. I'm a program analyst in our other division, the sister division to Eve's, our business and workforce investment division. So where you saw all of our ARC goals, we're the ones that manage everyone basically but 3 and 4. So we're looking at entrepreneurship and business development. We're looking at workforce and education, which is my particular area. So a lot of the local community colleges and universities end up working with me or one of my colleagues that we focus on those. Or 5, which is focused on capacity building. So whether that is community leaders or just general capacity for organizations, that's a lot of my colleagues are managing that program. And we've obviously been talking about construction for a while. Some of those problems that we have talked about in construction do unfortunately translate to non-construction. So I, for example, have a project that had all of their match funding just get ripped out from under them in the time it took from when they originally applied to when it got to my desk. And so those things happen. We're working through it. We're helping them find other match sources, but it has delayed that application. I think we're on about 9 months. Hopefully at the tail end, I think we have some good ideas coming through now, but it happens. So those complex issues are also relevant to all of you all working in the non-construction side of things. So my part is going to be talking a little bit more about our other ARC grant programs. What we've been talking about here today and what you do working through the state office is predominantly our area development, which is our broadest program. The one that has the most flexible funding is, we'll say, a little bit less competitive in terms of the states want to get you funding. When you're applying to some of our more competitive programs are directly through ARC, like Power, you're competing against everyone in all the other states. So it ups the competition a little bit. Okay, so I won't go into too much of this. We've talked about it multiple times. So this is a little more detail on ARC as a whole, talking about when we were started in 1965 and all of our counties. We use the term local development district as our broadest term for the PDCs because every state has a different term. So one of my colleagues manages those predominantly. She's in, her name's Jacqueline Corder. She's in Eve's division now, was in mine division, and she works with all of our PDCs, LDDs throughout Appalachia. So ARC is focused on socioeconomic parity as our goal. So that's where we talk about things like the county economic status. We are trying to get you all to attainment counties. So we essentially want to make ourselves obsolete eventually and have that where we've created socioeconomic parity to the rest of the country and bring up the economic development of the entire region. And there's programs like I'll get to, like Arise, that is focused on doing this in regional, in much more cooperative projects that span multiple states. And so that means that we're not wanting you all to really compete against each other, but to work together. So all these things that I will just not repeat again, talking about our investment priorities. but I'll hit on our programs a little bit more. So like I said, area development is our base program. It is a certain amount of funding is assigned to each state every year, which is what funds the programs, Omar and Bill were talking about that you apply for through the state. It's formula driven, so there's a certain amount set to each state. Sometimes this is also based on, the amount of distressed counties, for example, that are included, and other ways that we're trying to bring up the economy of the region. And you work with your state partners predominantly through this program. Power, that you apply directly through us. So that program will be coming up in the next few months here. So keep that in mind. You can apply to multiple programs. We usually ask that is for different projects. So I understand that, brings up the level of complexity and management for your organizations. But you can apply and have multiple grants under area development. You only are allowed one power grant to have at a time, but you can have both. Or you can have grants from one of our other programs like Arise, like Inspire. So we're trying to get funding out to the region. So this one, we have grants up to $2 million, and yeah, winter, but really it's going to be starting. I think those applications, we haven't released the notice of funding opportunity, but that will be coming out in the next few months. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah,
So
fair.
give you guys, so in Virginia, and this is not indicative of every single state in the region, and we had this conversation on our planning call. We do have applicants in Virginia because unfortunately our state program time window opens at around the same time power opens. And so while ARC strongly discourages folks to apply for both programs for the same project, we actually encourage you to do both. One, higher levels at ARC for power. Two, what you see in our allocation is plussed up significantly compared to our normal budget. So if you've been around for several years, our normal allocation is a quarter of what you see our current allocation is. And so we do strongly encourage folks to apply for both. If you are, and that's really competitive at the federal
It
level.
is.
If you are awarded a power grant and a state area development grant, you will have to choose which grant you want. We currently allow you to reprogram your state ARC grant if you are awarded one, and you defer to the power resource. That's only because we currently have additional dollars. So I do want to state those additional dollars, as you saw on the allocation slide, will not be around much longer. And so you will not have to choose because we will choose it for you probably 2 years from now. But as of right now, you can apply to both because our timelines do overlap with our state area development grant, which is opening officially next week, and probably when the power grant letter of intent will open sometime before the spring. And so I do want to say, you can apply to both for the same project. You will have to choose if you are successful in both programs. And we at the state level, because most often folks choose the power, I'm just going to be very transparent, we will allow you to be programmed for another eligible use under the state ARC program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so Friends of Southwest Virginia just went through that. And Kim can share with you offline about how that worked for our organization. Dana, you had a question.
Does power also need to go through the LDD?
Typically,
Highly-
you know your thunder, you should
Just-
be talking to us as the state program. And the
Yeah,
LDD.
yeah. I mean, the states have to give approval to your project still. Like it's concurrence. So it's not the same application process that goes directly to the state. Your application comes directly to us, but you do need to still have the state sign off on this eventually. And your PDCs can give you so much help and resources that we can't, especially because it's a competitive program. We can only help applicants work out their projects so much when you're competing against other ones. We're the ones reviewing your application. So please, as like a blanket statement, please talk to your PDCs. They will help you put your applications together and get things organized. So please do that. It's not necessarily going to be a requirement. We're not going to have to check that box when we review your application, but you see the difference. It will make your project application so much better to work with that. So please do that. Okay.
So question first was, so that works with power, is that the same with the rise?
I will get to that in a second. So hold up, guys. Yeah. Let me finish my presentation first, and then we'll hit on out more questions.
Sorry.
You're okay.
So for the any ARC application, we're still going to be doing an 895 here. So you should be coming to PDC regardless.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll get through some questions. I'm going to try to, we have time. I want to have more time for breakouts. So kind of let me get through the rest of my presentation, and then we'll hit on a lot of these. We'll have our breakouts and get to chat through your questions more. So Power Inspire focuses on substance use disorder recovery. So that's more of our health related program. And they have a little bit less funding than our Power program. It's also been around a lot less time than our Power program. So yeah, we have 13 million that was awarded last year. Grants, we just launched that one. So the funding opportunity notice went out, I think it was a couple days ago, honestly. So keep in mind that that will be coming up soon, getting your applications through and such to our office. So if you're thinking of applying to that, do so. And again, to the point I made earlier, you can apply to this program and you can apply to the area development program. I will say, please have them be different projects if humanly possible, or it will be a similar point and you have to pick one. So keep that in mind. Arise, this is our newest program, our farthest reaching program, because it is focused on multi-state activities. One of my projects, the one that I mentioned that got their funding pulled out from under them, it's focused on internet service provider technicians. It's an Arise program. Tamara, I'm sure, is very well aware of them. Great project, lost all of their match funding, and we're working with them to put that together, nearing a deadline. But that kind of thing happens, but it is spanning multiple states. And, the focus, those grants can be much larger. I manage a couple of these 10 million ones. They're big, hefty projects, and they take a long time to review. And so these are another one that from the initial time they put together the application a couple years ago, they only probably recently got funded for that. And they are just, be aware of how onerous to manage those they can be when you have so much funding. Requires having multiple partners across multiple states. This one is, I will put it as kind of on hold. We will be putting out the new notice for applications. So the new notice of funding opportunity to come out in the fall of this year. So that will be happening again. We have been doing this as a rolling cycle, but yeah, it will be coming out at the end of the fall. Ready Appalachia. This one, a lot of this also has been not necessarily wrapped up, but we've worked through a lot of these programs. So the Ready program specifically, I'll use that terminology for one of them that's focused on nonprofits, local development districts, community foundations, and local governments. So those ones are for building capacity with those organizations. The new program that we are now getting competitive funding for is the Grants to Grow. So they are technically two separate, but very much managed by the same staff in my division. And those ones are, again, focusing on community capacity building. The other one the Ready program had a very large training component. So those were there for, you'd have almost a year-long training program, and then you'd be allowed to get a grant that would be a smaller grant, but therefore, allowing you to hire staff to build your capacity, allow you to buy equipment or software or things like that, that directly impact your organization. And it would only be allowed to impact your organization specifically. It could not have an external focus. You could not be using that to help anyone else. We want to build up your organization. So that one, again, we're going to be working on the Grants to Grow program coming up in the near future, in the next few months. Yes, it is active as of this early fall.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are you saying that it's likely that it will be funded again?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
The plan, I believe, is to be funding it again. It is, everything's a contingency. of who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, that is hopefully to have that a longer running program. Yeah, the grants, the ready part, that one, also again, a potential for more funding for that, but that one has largely selected its cohort of staff. Yeah. So the Appalachian Regional Energy Hub, another one of our programs, that's a newer one, focusing on natural gas hub research, hydrogen hub. We have one of these up in New York that was funded, so, or getting ready together. So yeah, so that's another one of our initiatives. I'm going to skip over this. This we've all talked about. Sorry, guys. And then we have some of our partner programs. So the ones I predominantly just talked about are you're either applying directly through us or you're applying directly through the state. Some of these ones, like our work program, is in partnership with the Department of Labor. So one of our newest staff members, whose name is Tamala Lewis, she just started literally this week. After Kinsey Walker, who had been our previous staff member over this program, if anyone had worked with her directly, had been managing this. So it's a competitive workforce program, and it's done through DOL. But it is specifically focused, the funding is targeted exclusively to entities within the ARC region, and ARC is the one providing a lot of assistance to manage those projects. The Appalachian Gateway Communities Initiative, so AGCI. So this is focused on a partnership that we have with the Conservation Fund and the National Endowment for the Arts. So again, providing technical assistance and some in-person workshops just like this to communities that are bordering public lands. So whether that is national parks, so a lot of the grants for this did go to support those around New River Gorge in West Virginia, but could be other state parks and other public venues, so trails and such, again, bordering public lands and supporting, in this case, a lot more focused on like tourism development. So everything has an acronym. The RERC program, our Recreation Economy for Rural Communities. So this is a partnership with the EPA and Forest Service. So again, providing technical assistance to communities, focusing on outdoor recreation, focusing on like action plans, local food, local places. That one doesn't work. So LFLP. So again, focusing on technical assistance for those focusing on their local food economy. And this is a picture of our website. So we have a lot of these on our website. Our website is consistently updated. We try to avoid having any outdated information, including like the forms. We'll have the relevant forms and links to them to keep them as evergreen as possible on our website. So, you know, look to there for additional assistance. And otherwise, thank you. We now have 34 minutes to work on our breakouts and answer a lot more of your individual questions.
So one thing I will say that being Tim showed the ARC website, that I think it's, you guys scroll all the way down to the bottom, but ARC puts out a weekly newsletter.
Sure. Yeah.
You think you might be interested in funding, particularly because the notice when notices come out or any kind of funding opportunities, they put those out. But it's also good to see, you're kind of like, I want to see some examples of what other people in the region and other states are doing, maybe get you to think about things. It's a really good, informative newsletter. It's pretty much every Thursday. They take a break over the holidays, but they're very regular about getting that information out. So I'd encourage you to do that. So we have an hour now, roughly. We wanted to take 15, 20 minutes to kind of do some breakouts to let people get in smaller groups, talk among yourselves. Our DHCD staff will be here. If you're online, I think Kelly's going to separate you into either a construction or a non-construction. Kelly's going to be in the construction or non-construction room, and Eve's online, and you'll be in the construction room to help answer questions or talk through. I guess the thing here is, who is thinking about primarily a non-construction project?
Okay,
I might want to
there's enough of you.
group together somewhere, and then everybody else just kind of get into like smaller groups of probably 5 to 8, something like
Okay.
that. And we can, like I
Yeah.
said, we can wander around and
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah, if I can have, I'm sorry to push people out of their seats and whatnot, but if I can have the non-construction group, please come over generally in this area. I would prefer that if possible. And then, yes, there's obviously a larger contingent of construction group. They'll be milling around and helping those guys. So.
Actually,
Yeah, that's how we obviously have, the office hours.
yeah, but it just put them in 2 rooms. I'm trying to fix it. It just put them in 2 rooms, and I'm trying to stop that. Delete. Okay. And I have to manually assign it. That's my fault. No worries. Make sure you put Eve in construction. Okay. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yep. Yeah. Okay. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, wonderful. If people can start saying if they want to be in non-construction or construction, just let me know and I'll put everybody into separate breakout rooms, okay? Sorry. All right, so if you are wanting to be in a construction breakout group, please go ahead and put construction in the chat. Okay, non-construction. All right, let's see. Non-construction is Tom Moran. Kirk Story is in construction. Ian Fraser is in non-construction. If I butcher y'all's names, I apologize. Carrie is in construction. Let's see. Kathy B is in non-construction. Let's see. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go ahead and just put them into 2 separate groups. We're going to have Eve from ARC Washington in the first one. And if you all need to move rooms, just let me know. And Eve or myself will be able to move you, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and start divvying up the rooms. Back. Construction. Eve. Kurt. Carrie. Put you there. Okay. Construction. Eve, hey, I'm getting ready to put you in the room.
Henry. Bert. Okay. I'm doing a breakout room, but I'll talk to you in just a minute if you want to. Okay. Open. Okay. Can you get into that room?
This is Riley.
Hey. Kathy, can you all, we're doing the breakout rooms. You're fine. You're fine.
Oh.
Oh, it's not raised. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I am trying to figure out audio, so give me 1 second.
This is certainly.
Okay, we are gonna just take some questions. Hey guys, thank you for joining. Can you guys hear me okay? Oh. Okay. Rebecca Morgan.
Okay.
Awesome. I can take some questions. Any comments, questions?
You don't want to.
Okay. That sounds good. Have you registered for one of them so far?
There was a new opportunity over the March 31 and the DHCD wanted that same program.
For,
I'm not sure what.
March 30, the area development? Yes.
you online, we'll actually have PDF of both slides combined, and then our hyperlinks to our respective websites and resources for applying. And one last note, Bill has about TA sessions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you got the email that said to sign up, there were PA sessions scheduled for, next.
Yes.
Second.
So if there's no, there might be one spot.
There might be some, so want to sign up for that. We are looking to do some more. And give you time to digest what you heard today. You may have questions. Those will be virtual and get kind of like these little breakouts and give you a chance to talk through these project ideas. Sales, watching, kind of help you, or maybe you've already got your idea, but you've got some very technical questions about the yard, performance maybe. Again, do that to give you enough time though before the March deadline, so you could meet with us and do that and make sure.
And so two things, ARC would love for you all to scan their QR code and take a survey. I don't know if I guess if we post it on our page, then maybe we'll do that.
Yeah.
This is Joey Cantrell. I'm a public health nurse. How can I help you? Sure. Emily. Did you say Emily? Mm-hmm. Well, 20. I'm sorry. Repeat the date one more time. Okay. If you'll hold on just one minute. And what was the, what test did the client have? Okay. Just 1 second. I'll be right back with you. Sir, that was Hannah Robinson. Yes. Yes, sir. Steve. I'm an RN public health nurse at the Wise County Health Department. Thank you. Have a good day. This is Joey. This is Joey. Hi, honey. Yeah, no, I don't, uh-huh, yeah. Well, I don't have him doing anything electrical outside. All I told him what I wanted him to do, right? The kitchen light and the curtain rods and the battery. No, oh, I ain't worried about that thing. Yeah, just tell him I said not to worry with that today. That because you all are living there and having to cut the power and all of that. I didn't tell him to do that today. So tell him I said not to worry with that today. It's fine. If he's got everything done, he's done. Yeah, just tell him, say, because we've got so much going on. Just the things that I told him is all I needed done today. And we'll worry about that other, a day when there's better weather and stuff. Okay. Okay, honey. Thank you. Sorry about that. Bye bye. Did that battery, make that light work or no? It did. So I just need to get, some others for how many other, exit signs, lights like that do we have? Just one other at the end of the hall? Okay. What about, is there one in the kitchen? Why is there a piece of wood back there? I wonder. Hmm. Okay. So the refrigerator, when I pushed the refrigerator back, it wasn't back in there as far as what it was. Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm glad the floodlight fixed or whatever that is. Cause like if the electricity, like if there were to be a fire or something, those things light up. See, if the electricity was lost to the house, it, it, yeah. Tell them to be careful when they open it then. No, I'm actually off tomorrow. Tomorrow's when you take him, isn't it? And I'm off tomorrow. So tell him I'll come down there tomorrow. And okay. It had a mark on it where it'd been hitting it some anyhow. So yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. So much just went on that I'm just now decompressing from my braces. Yeah. The door. I was in the middle of something and they all was like, do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? I was like, I don't. Bam, 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 bam. Hey, Jamie, she said, don't worry about that for a minute. She said, don't worry about the box. Yeah, well, tell him we'll do it on a day when it's better. If he's got everything done, he's done. Well, we don't want to lose power, and I don't want to take a chance on you getting shocked and all that good stuff. And I've got I'm gonna have to get those other batteries. So I'll just bring you down another day if you don't mind. And, if you want to work on that one light, and that receptacle and, just stuff like that, we'll work up something else, but I'll pay you this afternoon for, what I owe you on this one, and then we'll worry about that other stuff. It's up to you. I don't want them to, to lose power in them there today and stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you and I both said we were going to label that box, and we haven't done it yet. All righty. All right. I appreciate it.
That, and Dave sitting there shaking his head,
Mm.
basically, and then he looked at me and he said, I'm just gonna do it.
Whatever. Just do it. Just do it and be done. Whatever. Whatever.
And then he also got he actually took his shoes off earlier. He told me he didn't want to, but I said, well, I don't care. And now he just stepped in here and he made a big turtle right there.
That's what I started to say. I bet he's wore his shoes in the house, ain't he? I knew it. Uh-huh. Okay.
I run her up to the bank. She just has to have a proof of address, so we're going to give her the address here.
Yeah, that acceptance letter should do that. And you said we have two more of those exit signs, right? So I need two more batteries.
Bank, so she has me. After the bank, we could run to the vape store so she can get a vape.
I wanted to fuss at her anyhow. She's been in jail for how long? And then she's out there smoking this morning. Was she sneaking and smoking in jail? That's what I was trying to figure out, how she was getting nicotine in there.
She had her pack of cigarettes and she had that. I did a lot of times, but I would get out the first thing I would do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was gonna bust her tail. Yeah.
Yeah, she said she forgot there was a couple things at Walmart that she wanted to get. So I told her once after we get the bank stuff over with, we made her back down to Walmart because I need a pack of paper cleaner anyways, and I can print and stuff. But get that. And
You've got the petty cash there. So
yeah,
just use that petty cash and just stick those receipts in there. All right. Okay, sweetheart. Bye-bye. Well, this is a waste of time.